A father got a note from his daughter that was away at college. One day he opened it up and said, "Dear Dad, I would let you know that the money that you recently sent me has all been spent. I've used it to throw a party for my friends. During that time, the apartment that we live in was damaged. You'll be receiving a bill for damages done from the friends who were here together. As some of them were leaving, one of them hit my car. You'll probably hear from the insurance company about that as well. And I've met a new boy. We're really close together. He might even be moving in with you. Your loving daughter." Attached to that was another note that said, "All that other stuff was not true. I did make a D in one of my classes. Just keep that in perspective." It's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of judging one thing against the other. And for those of us who have tried to sort of soften the blow of things through the years, we may have tried to say, okay, here's what didn't happen. Here's what did. Last week, I started on a message about staying focused, using the Lord's temptation after his baptism as the jumping off point for that message. And just if you miss some of the times whenever we may have from part 1 and part 2, all the messages since we started on this COVID thing are found on the church Facebook page and also on YouTube under Linville Falls Community Church. If you would like to go back and fall asleep to any of those, you're welcome to. But we talked last week about how we stay focused and that it's so critical to stay on that which is paramount so that we don't get turned aside by everything that's secondary. An unfocused life sort of going off in all directions, and it gets us nowhere. And I use the adage of Harvey Pinnock's little red book of golf, where he talks about the major thing is to take dead aim, is to have a way that you're going. And we talked about the importance of that in our lives, and we're going to follow up on that just a little bit today, because after these temptations of Jesus in Luke chapter 4, he ends up at the end of that, and in verse 14, after these temptations, he says, "Then Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread throughout the entire vicinity. He was teaching in their synagogues, being acclaimed by everyone." So after these temptations, immediately afterwards, he came and began to teach the people. He had been through this trial. He had had the deceiver tried to dissuade him, to turn him away. Do these things, have this acclaim. All these said, no, that is not the purpose. So I think during this Thanksgiving week that we're looking at right now, with all that's going on, there are, as I was thinking about this message and the fact that we had the dinner planned and we had to cancel it, well, we chose to cancel that just from the safety standpoint, how that is such a microcosm of everything that's going on. The plans that we had didn't work out. You have to change, you have to adapt. Many people's lives are dramatically different than they were before, and there's a lot of doubt and fear and turmoil in people's lives. Very rightly. I mean, this is not something that's imaginary. It is real. Cindy and I were just talking this week, the psychological and emotional results of this may not be known for years. How it's impacted young people and folks who are having to stay in, and just the impact on families. And I think this is one of those cases where truly the law of unintended consequences comes to play, where things are going to be coming out of this that we never saw or anticipated. So in the midst of that uncertainty and that turmoil and departure from the norm, I think it's important that we understand why focus is critical, why we have to maintain where we are with who we are, because if not, we end up like people that we may have known about that when we're at work or we're trying to do something, and they're easily distracted by everything that comes along. And at the end of the day, I read this little joke this week. It said, I went into the room looking for my glasses. I saw the windows that needed to be cleaned. In order to do that, I needed to go get some stuff out of the cabinet. While I was in the cabinet, I realized they needed to be straightened up. So while I was straightening it up, I realized that's why I was out of a certain thing that I need. So then I had to go get the car, but the car needed to have the oil changed in it, which is why I am now in another town at Walmart and don't know why. You know, and this is kind of the way we are. I mean, it's, you know, we have the joke in our Cindy and our family with that, you know, being on it's like squirrel, you know, and you're over here. And if you're not careful, those things rule you without some focus, without getting back to the center. You kind of have to reel people in sometimes. And I think the Lord looks at us and all this hubbub and turmoil and saying, come back to the center. As we think about Thanksgiving and giving thanks, I think it's critical we understand what it is that is the core of our faith-based life that causes us to be able to have Thanksgiving as a matter of course, even in the face of days that may not seem very thanks-worthy. Thanks is a deliberate thing that we have to do from time to time. It is a purposeful, deliberate thing. So I think if we go through that as we understand what our focus should be and what the Lord teaches us, is first and foremost, we have to focus on the fact that we are a child of God. We are His creation. We are made in His image. All the things that we live, that He gives to us. Whenever Satan came to him, to Jesus with these temptations, he tried to sort of attack his focus. He had just been told, the Father had just said to him, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. The Spirit descended like the dove. And then the deceiver said, don't worry about that. Let's talk about how critical it is for you to be famous, for you to have food, for you to have acclaim, and all the things that the world has for you. Immediately he began to take away from this fact that the Lord had told him, you are my beloved Son. And I think lots of times in our world, the deceiver comes and tells us, I know that this is critical and that you believe this and that's all well and good, but this is what's really important. This is what we need to worry about. The Spirit of God. This is a sort of one of those foundational truth moments that I hope you lock into. When the Spirit of God descended upon Jesus at His baptism, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Scripture tells us that we, by virtue of the Lord's grace and mercy and through His working in us, we are acclaimed, we're given the rights to become as the sons and daughters of God. We are heirs and fellow heirs with Jesus. So this promise is ours as well. So we never let the enemy take that focus away. If we understand that our purpose, our focus, our being, our root cause is that we are a child of God, then the kind of activity that a child of God should be invested in should be at the forefront of our existence. The deceiver comes and he wants to take this away. He says, I think so many times, if you will just do these things and have acclaim, if you will let people know how good you are. I think that oftentimes he tells us this. He said, you're here to love people, to help people, to help people who are hungry, to do all these great things so that people might know how good you are. Now that is not a bad thing, but it's a dangerous thing. Because we as human beings, it's hard for us to not listen when people tickle our ears with telling us how good we are. And we have to be careful that we're not the purveyors and we're not the givers of bread at the expense of being the givers of grace. You with me? We have to be careful that we don't let the things that we do that are good get in the way of the great that we have the potential to be. There's a lot of organizations that help people, and we should. There's a lot of missions that are done, and we should have those. There's a lot of things that we do to have tangible impact on people's lives, and we should do that. The problem is we can't only do that. Because that's the first temptation, is turn these stones into bread. You know, feed people. Be known as the person who feeds everyone and does away with world hunger. What a great thing that is. Except that is still temporal. That is still here. It does not deal with the eternal impact of what the gospel is. So we have to be careful of that temptation washing over to us. Secondly, he says you have to be about power. Said, throw yourself off there, you'll be protected. You're important. The Lord will take care of you. We have to be careful that we're not turned aside by these positions of these promises of power and being taken care of and have everything well. And the third one, I think, is even more insidious, where he's talking about doing something spectacular. If there's what but the people in the world like, it's a show. If we go to the 4th of July, or anywhere where there's fireworks, and you know kind of what it's supposed to be, and come time for the fireworks show, and there's 3 guys out there with sparklers and Roman candles, and they're going, there's like, and you're going, okay, now what? That wasn't what we expected. A lot of times in the world, we come looking for the spectacular at the expense of the essence of what we're there to be a part of. If we bedazzle the world, if we have all the pomp and circumstance, if we have all the things that draw people, that's great. That's wonderful. We are known as this great and glorious, I once heard this joke, the Reverend Glory Bedazzle. It's all great. People are drawn to that. But the problem is, with that temporal approach, with that thing of show us this big show, Jesus, let me make you this big production, is that next week, those same people that were so happy are going, okay, now what? Now what? What are we going to do next? That's the problem with show business. It has to be continually bigger and better. It has to be more great. Every product that's advertised to you, every 2 or 3 years it comes out with what? A new and improved version. Makes me kind of disappointed that I've been using the one that wasn't any good. Right? I've been using the one that was inferior, because now there's this new and improved one. When I was ran a college bookstore, Gardner Webb, the publishing company, if you're in academic books, you have a book, and there are editions of the book. And as a bookstore manager, we had to have the most current edition. And if you buy books, You might buy a Western Civilization book, that's the 4th edition, but now next year the teacher wants to use the 5th edition. So now your 4th edition book is useless, worthless. Not always, but oftentimes the 5th edition, the only thing that changed was they put a different cover on it, rearranged the chapters a little bit, but it's the same content. But they had to do something new to create more sales because everybody had bought the 4th edition. I don't mean to say about all publishers, but that is a fact. And we do that if we're careful about the show and all the bigness. So we have to not focus on all that because that works. That would work. The temptations that Jesus endured, if they were given to and are being given to a lot of the population, they would take them because it's easy. It would work. And it sounds good. And it looks good at first blush. Jesus was saying, I will not come to be anything less than what I am. I will not lower the mission to meet the expectations of the people that I might come in. He said, that's not in character with who I am as the Son of God. The focus to maintain who he was. As we look in the world around us and we're trying to, this week, sort of, for many times, conjure up the reason for thanks. It's harder this time because we're not going to have maybe the big family deal. We're not going to have all the things that normally are there. We're not going to, your business that you work for may be having a really tough year. You're not going to get an extra day off. You're not going to get a bonus. You're not going to get that turkey. We were talking last week that some of the grocery suppliers said they're having a kind of a glut of turkeys, because people aren't gathering together and doing that. It's harder. So you have to maintain a focus on what I know to be true. And after Jesus went through this temptation and had all these things that were put before him, and he said, that's not who I am, he then left, and the first thing he did, he returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit. After this temptation, after all this had been put to him, he returned in the power, and news about him spread through the entire vicinity. He was teaching in the synagogues, being acclaimed. So the first thing he had to do was realize who he was, the Son of God, sent for a mission. So what we do is we recognize our purpose, our focus is on who we are as a child of God. Secondly, we focus on what we were sent to do. The purpose of the church. The purpose of why we exist. And we talked about that a few weeks ago. To glorify God and edify the body. To glorify him and edify the body. Jesus said, so the Lord has sent me, so send I you. So our purpose, what we're called to do, is very clear. We're called to be the hands and feet. We're called to be the missionaries. We're called to be the ambassadors in a world that oftentimes doesn't want to hear the message. But that's what we're called to do. Called to be. And we must care about this world that is lost without the message of the gospel. We must find a way to get around all the excuses, all the reasons not to, all the things that the deceiver comes and says, if you'll do this, that will take the place of that. If you will do this, that'll be okay. Just sort of dabble around the edges. Just nibble a little bit here and there. I've said before that I don't like going, I've not been to a lot of them in my life, but I have been to a few. Very fancy dinners. You know, like more folks than you need and stuff like that. You know, real, you know, place settings and all these, and people are there and you've got nice clothes on. Do you really feel like you can eat everything you want? You're like, oh, I've got to watch this, and I've got, oh my gosh. Remember, my junior year, we had our prom at Grandfather Country Club. It had been opened. We're up there, and of course these guys in these rented suits and girls with white gloves and the whole thing, they brought out to dinner and it was baked chicken. quarter baked chicken. 17, 18-year-olds, 16, you know, trying to figure out how to eat with nice clothes on, you know, and you're trying to impress everybody. I thought, this is not good. Now, if we were at home, if we were comfortable, what would we do? We would pick that chicken up and eat it. Right? So sometimes what I'm saying is that there's the situation that we're in causes us to change the way we approach it, and we just sort of nibble around the edges, and we're very dainty, and we're very polite, and we try to use all the knives and the forks, and we cut out our little meat and have small bites. The Lord, I think, gives to us a message that says, what I want you to do with this gospel that I've given to you, with this grace and peace, I want you to immerse yourself in it. I want it to be so comfortable and sustaining to you that you eat it like you're at home by yourself. I've often said, you know, watermelon and fried chicken should be eaten outside by yourself. You know, it's that because you can get right in there with it. I mean, you know, that's the way, the power of this message of the gospel of what He's given to us is not to be apportioned and dainty and to be formal. It's to be sustaining in our hunger. And our focus should be on the fact that we are a child of God, and He has sent us into the world to be His emissaries. Behind all that veneer of the world, behind all of that politeness, and behind all of that facade of respectability and that everything's okay, there are hurting, dying, lonely, distraught people. And I try to keep that in mind, especially during this time as I encounter folks sometimes. And I hear people talking. There was a guy, I was in the pharmacy yesterday at Premier in Newland, and there was a fellow, and I didn't know who he was, but he was talking, and it was kind of out there. And he was not talking to anybody in particular, just, you know, to whomever. My first thought was, wow, he is, you know, Elvis has left the building here. But then I'm thinking, you know, these are distraught, hurting people. We have to be aware of that. When people say things that we don't agree with, when people have a view that we're not comfortable with, when maybe diametrically opposed to what we have to often realize that they may be coming for a position that we don't know. But behind that veneer of power and control and respectability is hurt and doubt and fear about what's going on. D.L. Moody, great evangelist, began Moody Press in Chicago, came after him as one of his legacies. He was at the window of his office looking down on the busy Chicago street there one day, and one of the people that was with him said, no, he asked the person, said, what do you see? And he said, I see a lot of people And Moody said, when I see them, I see people too, people that do not know what I know about the Lord. So some person just sees the crowd, and the other person sees the need. Our focus is to be on what the Lord's called us to be, and that's salt and light. He said to Nicodemus, Jesus said to Nicodemus that you must be born again. You must allow this experience to be a part of your existence. And this week, when it's hard to be thankful, when it's hard to know what it is to have joy and peace, realize that happiness is not what we're seeking, because happiness is transient. Happiness is when everything's going good, we are happy. When it doesn't, we are sad. Joy comes from the understanding that we are who we are. You see, we're all focused on something, or everybody is focused on something. It can be the news, the headlines, the things that aren't the problems that we encounter, or it can be the fact that in the midst of all this, I am a child of God. I've been sent with a mission. I've been sent with a purpose. And I have to follow that at the exclusion, even if it means not joining in that conversation. I've wanted so many times the last few months to go, yeah, but how about this? And get into this. But I thought, that's not what I need to do. I could probably win that verbal battle, but I would lose the war. I would lose the opportunity to share with them the gospel, which is far more important. We think this is critical. I was talking to someone this week about, they said, nothing like this has ever happened before. And I thought, have you read history? You know, there's that whole Black Plague thing. Pandemics have gone throughout history. There have been entire civilizations wiped out. This is not a small thing. But all of the events of 2020, as much as we joke and talk about them, is but a blip in history. Our focus is on the eternal. Our focus is upon Him. I give thanks that I am still able to proclaim the message, that I'm still a child of the King, that I'm still safe and secure in His arms. Job, though He slay me, yet I will praise Him. We don't know what the rest of this day brings, much less the rest of this week or month or year. So as you go through this week and as you encounter people, and you will have people this week, wherever you're at, your family and your home and your workplace, that they're just going to say, man, I don't know, there's nothing to be thankful for. Everything's just gone to pieces. Everything's so hard. Why is all this? Maybe our focus should be as gently and as lovingly as we can to not join in that conversation. Yeah, you're right. But rather, you know, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just so thankful that I am a child of the King, that I have a faith that transcends this world, that there are greater and higher elements at play here. Let's talk about it. Could I share with you what allows me to feel that way? Could you share with me your hurt and your pain and your doubt and your fear and your anger and all that, and just let it flow forth? Because maybe they've not had the chance to. That's our mission. That's what our focus should be, is being the elements of the grace and peace and love during this. So when it comes time for Thanksgiving, it is not just a day, but it's a ritual. It is what we do. It's who we are. Everybody focuses on something. The question is what? What are we focused on this week? What